recording.
Day, man. It's a way to get us started off the right way.
Yeah. So we're sitting here with a glass of nice bourbon, and we just finished off eating way too much catfish.
Oh my gosh. Well, we didn't even finish it off.
That's true.
That's the crazy part.
I'll put it in your fridge in the little Tupperware thing.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're either gonna like forget that and get in trouble, or have it
Roxy's
for another
gonna
meal.
try it later tonight.
So all that to say, we got back from a fishing trip the other day. It was just kind of a impromptu after work type of deal. I've been going out the last couple nights, and I finally feel like I'm at the point where this boat is now like paying off for me. I'm finally getting my money's worth out of this little John boat. Man, I had so many struggles with registering this thing, and it wasn't titled, and so I had to prove that it wasn't stolen and get it weighed and get it registered and hammer a made-up serial number on the side of it so the government now accepts it as a real thing. And man, it's been crazy. And then the motor trouble, I think we talked about that. Maybe that was the last podcast.
Probably.
It's been a while.
The motor trouble got so bad at one point that we were taking Elijah, my 7-year-old, out, and he goes, "Dad, are there going to be any complications this time?"
Well, I was pulling the string, and he said, "No malfunctions, right?" Like, come on, man. But it all worked out well. Yeah, and the last couple times I've gone out, it's mostly worked well. I've never had a situation where I'm like, oh no, I'm dead in the water, I'm stuck.
Well, except for when the trolling motor went out and then the cord ripped.
Well, yeah, but that was that whole last time. Since then, it's been mostly good. And there are a lot of times where when I started, it'll run for a little while and then quit, and then I'll start it, it'll run for a little while and then quit, and then it'll go. And as long as I keep the RPMs not idling low, it'll run fine. So I did 2 little mini fishing trips on my own, tried a couple different lakes. So if you're from DFW, you probably recognize some of these lakes. The first time I went out to Ray Roberts, and that whole east side of the lake is just so stumpy. It's just it's like a forest, basically. You look on your depth finder and you just you see just all the trees sticking up.
Well, I remember the last time we went out there, you were telling me that, and I'm sitting there with my back to where you're going forward, and my back's there.
Yeah, I was like, let me know if I'm about to hit something.
and then he jerks the boat. I'm like, you went boom!
Yeah, boom.
Oh, wow, okay.
What was that?
There really was a stuff there. Yeah.
You thought I was messing with you?
I thought you were trying to throw me off the boat.
It was 30 seconds after I did that. Okay, hard to starboard.
Yeah, that's right.
But went out to that lake just by myself, caught a few sand bass, caught a huge drum that broke off as I was pulling it into the boat, then checked my little noodle jugs and got a couple catfish. Then I went out, and I had actually never been out and fished Lavon, so I wanted to just check that out. And honestly, I got out there way too late in the day, and that was one of these days where it was 106 outside. This summer has just been absolutely brutal. Yeah, it's been ridiculous. And at one point, I just pulled up on the beach and jumped in the water and just sat there like a beached whale, just I need to cool off, man.
In a bathtub,
pretty much warm water. Yeah. So went out there. So I caught one good cat. Caught one crappie that was just barely undersized, and then caught probably, 9 or 10 white bass. One of them I kept. There were some other ones that were keepers, and I made a mistake of when I was measuring them, I was measuring to the fork on the inside of the tail instead of pinching the tail. So there were a lot that, they would have been legal. They would have been 10 and a quarter, but I was thinking that they were, 9 and a half, 9 3/4 because I was measuring them wrong, but whatever. So I only ended up with one white bass and then one cat right at the end of the day. And then I guess that kind of brings us to, the part 3 of this kind of Dog Days of Summer series. And it's all these little short fishing episodes because there's not really a master theme to them.
And it's during the middle of the week, right after work, we just haul booty and try to see if we can go catch something.
Yeah, using whatever excuse we can to just get out there and beat the heat and just go try to catch a fish. So we went and did that. I replaced the engine hose, the fuel line on my motor, went down to a smaller size, and so Daniel was kindly inside Shields buying minnows and hooks while I was out there in the parking lot working on the boat. And I didn't get any mean looks or asked to leave.
It was funny, though, when we just showed the video to my kids, which, by the way, go watch the video. It's pretty good. When we showed the video to my kids, my daughter goes, "Hey, that's Shields in the background."
I'm like, man, you've got her trained well.
Yeah, and she's 3.
That's Shields. I thought she was going to be like, "Hey, that's you."
Yeah.
Like,
no,
that's Shields.
That's Shields. Yeah.
So Shields, hit me up.
Yeah, that's right.
But got that working. Then we went out to the lake and we tried the east side of Louisville, which I'd been out to the west side many, many times, but never been out to the east side. We put in at a little inlet in a park and just kind of floated out around a marina. I guess right off the bat, you caught a little largemouth.
Yeah.
And that was just on a minnow, right?
It was just on a minnow. We went out and there's like a marina with these tires in front of it, right, to stop the wake. And we went and just fished. I don't know. That was probably 300 yards off of the dock, maybe a little bit more than that.
Not far.
And it was like probably 5th or 6th cast, caught a little largemouth. And then we decided to go into the marina and like go through the slip areas. And
I thought that'd be good.
Man, it seemed like there was bites and stuff going on. We got in there, there's nothing.
Well, and especially with like crappie and stuff that anything that like structure, I would think like being in the kind of lanes of the marina would have been good.
Yeah, nothing.
We didn't get a single bite.
And it was pretty calm. And then we went out a little bit further to the bigger tires.
Yeah, the breakwater kind of where that marina opens up to the larger section of the lake. And we just tied onto that.
And the wind started blowing a little bit more. Like we'd cast out and then it'd be right back to us in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's like we'd have, a line on each side of the pole and one in front, and then
they'd all be together.
Yeah, before like a minute later, we just have 3 bobbers in the back of the boat.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing to talk about that, man, it took me until I was 33 years old to discover the magic of slip bobbers.
Wait, how old are you now?
Oh, man, I'm 34 now, dude. It's just, I wish we could just stop this and just, I would have locked it in at about 27.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think that would have been peak.
That's a whole nother conversation. I think the ages of 28 to 32, peak of your life.
Yeah, it's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
So if you're below that, then enjoy it, look forward to it.
Yeah, you got 4 good years.
Yeah, for the rest and probably the majority of my audience, well, sorry, buddy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it took me way too long in life to discover the magic of slip bobbers. And because I was just using a conventional clip-on bobber, and so you can really only run the hook about as deep as your pole is long. And so it gets to be a pain to deal with when you're trying to cast this long thing and you've got a 6-foot rig all connected and you're trying to throw it. But versus a slip bobber, you tie your hook, then you put a little weight just to kind of to sink it and then to serve as a stop. And then your bobber that slides up and down, then tie another little piece of line just to give it kind of a place to top out. And then you can run it 10, 12, 14 feet deep, which worked out really well because right where we were, I think we were in like 27, 28 feet of water right there. So that's what we were running. I think we were running 1 normal bobber and 2 slip bobbers.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just going to leave 2 rods set up to slip bobbers just all the time.
Might as well. Yeah, it works out well.
Because with that, you can just adjust the knot and just make it whatever depth you want. So I'm just going to leave those set up, and then the other one's kind of the wild card, depending on what we're doing at the time.
And so you tie the knot on with separate string. It's not part of the main line.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they actually sell little like bobber stops. It's like a little piece of plastic but I'm like, well, you just tie another knot on the string. And
and then you can adjust it however you want.
Yeah. It's not really holding any tension other than like the weight of the bobber and the suspended bait. So all it has to do is stop the bobber from going any further. Yeah. So I just use like, another piece of 6-pound line.
I thought that was, I like it a lot because to Pliny's point, you can cast better.
Yeah.
And you can be a little bit more accurate than trying to flop around a whole 6-foot line.
Yeah.
And then, it works just like a bobber. I mean, you see it go down. The only difference, what I noticed is on some of those like deeper bites, I thought, this is probably like 2 feet down. I'm just going to reel up a little bit. But if you don't know how much line you put out there, you could end up reeling up a lot more.
Yeah.
Because the bobber's just slipping with it. So
yeah. Well, and I think all the bites that we were getting were mid-column. So, 12, 14 feet, somewhere around there. So I guess you caught the largemouth, and then what was next?
I think you caught that little white bass.
Yeah.
I think we went and tied up by those. Because we didn't catch anything else. We went and tied up by those big tires, the brake tires.
Yeah.
And then it was funny. You would cast by the tires, and then the wind pulled it back. You're like, well, that's not going to do any good. And about 2 seconds later, you caught a little
it was just
white bass.
open right in the middle of the channel, I guess, where it was probably 30 feet deep. Yeah, caught a little white bass, and that's one thing I think white bass are really underrated, just because they're decent to eat. They're super fun to catch. They're in pretty much every lake in North Texas. It just seems like I always catch lots of little ones. I don't catch. There have been times where I've consistently pulled up big ones, but it seems like they school by size almost.
Yeah.
So I was like catching the kindergarten class, not the high school class. Because there have been times where, because I remember, I think it was Possum Kingdom, me and Kyle and some other guys were out there, and we were catching some, 15, 16, like some pretty good size ones. Yeah, that's a good size one. And all the ones we were like, oh, I think this one's barely legal at 10. Like we were pushing it, catching little ones. But I caught a little one, then you caught a little one.
Yeah. Then we tried to catch one and measure it, and it flipped out of the boat. And it was way too small, but
Yeah, it was pretty comical and pretty convenient too. I was trying to measure it on the side, holding it down, and then it just like bounced out.
He gone.
And you laughed at me, and I'm just like, yeah,
it was too small.
It was too little.
Yeah.
It was not a keeper. And then we were just sitting there, and then we just watched your bobber just slowly get pulled under.
Yeah, it was weird because earlier in the night I had cast, and I got hooked up on some of the I guess just kind of metal line that was holding the tires down.
Yeah, like the anchor cable.
The anchor cable, and I felt like when my bobber went down, I'm like, man, I couldn't have got caught again. Doesn't feel like something bit yet though. And then all of a sudden I felt a little tug on the line, and I yanked up, set the hook, and I'm like, man, there's something on here.
Yeah.
And it's not small. And I was running 6 pound line?
6 pound line and a little, I think that wasn't even the hooks that we had replaced. I think that was a little size 4 Aberdeen hook.
Well,
so
it's
like,
funny.
What you use for like a little bluegill.
Right. I thought about that later. I'm like, so not only, and we'll get into the story, not only was the line small, but the hook was tiny.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did this happen? And then to be able to actually get it, right, it's kind of crazy. So this thing starts, I wouldn't even say he was fighting. He was just a big fish that was swimming.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if it probably took him a while to realize he was hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. So I end up reeling him up, and I think probably 2 or 3 times I'm reeling him up. I'm fighting with him a little bit, and Pliny's like, hey man, that's a big fish. Let me get the net. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And I think 2 or 3 times we're like, hey, he's right there. Put the net in, and he was probably still like 5 or 6 feet down.
Yeah, he was way deeper because with that slip bobber, you
just don't know.
We were pretty deep, and just the way it was pulling, we're like, well, it's not a white bass because those things, for as little as they are, they just, as soon as they grab it, they just take off with it. Yeah. They just sprint.
Yeah.
And so we saw this was just like a slow, strong tug.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I hope it's not a drum. And I was thinking that because the last 2 times I went out, I caught a drum, one little one and one huge one. And both times they were just super slow with it. And so I'm like, maybe it's a drum, maybe it's a cat. And then I think, did you catch a gar previously?
Yeah, he busted off the line, but I caught a gar last time we were at it.
And he was also really slow with it. So that's why we're thinking like, it's
could
either
be a gar. Yeah.
But as it kept pulling, we're like, dude, this thing's huge. Like,
yeah,
it's got to be a catfish.
So we ended up pulling it up, and I was nervous the whole time that the line was going to snap because again, this was a lot bigger fish than what that line could support.
Yeah.
And so Pliny had definitely the A game in when he said, hey, let's grab the net and grab this thing.
There would have been no way to lift that thing.
No, there's no way. And what's funny is you went to grab him with a net, I think once or twice, and he was too big to get in the net.
Yeah, like I got his tail instead of his head one time, and then one time he just kind of slipped out.
It was crazy. So we ended up getting him in the boat, which was awesome. And we weighed him. He was 11 pounds.
Yeah, and it was a blue cat, and that's something that I'm not. So I feel like I catch more channel catfish than anything else in these North Texas lakes. And I feel like there's a lot of times where I'll just catch a catfish. And I'm like, oh, a channel cat, because that's what I'm used to catching. I've caught like one or 2 flatheads, but I'm just not used to catching flatheads. And so I'm used to calling everything a channel cat. And then when I look back at this stuff, I'm probably catching, 2/3 channel cats, 1/3 blues.
Yeah.
But almost all the bigger ones are blues.
Yeah.
And that's what this was. So it was a blue cat that was right at 11 pounds.
Yeah. So the best part of this, we were kind of guessing weight, and I think we were around 10 to 12 pounds. So we were pretty close. Mm-hmm. This sucker was big. Like it was.
What, like we didn't actually measure it, but
it was
I think
just
we
over 2 feet, I think.
Yeah, 26, something like that.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, we get him in the boat. We put him in the lower section of the boat because we had seen the other fish flop out earlier. We're like, hey, let's not let that happen. And Pliny's got I guess it's a wire mesh cage.
Yeah, basket. Fish basket.
That we were trying to fit him in, but before we did that, we're like, all right, let's get the hook out. And we go to pull the line of the hook out, and the line snaps.
Yeah. Right then and there.
Literally like barely touched it and the line snaps. So the whole fact that, thin line, small hook, we got him into the boat and then the line snapped, like that's unbelievable.
And I think some of it too was the whole time we were pulling on that, I didn't really inspect it if it had snapped where it had been, because they have it's almost hard. I think they don't even call it teeth. I think it's a tooth patch. It's almost like really coarse sandpaper.
Yeah.
So either the line had been rubbing back and forth across that the whole time and had just been worn out, or the eye of the hook, the line rubbing in there. But either way, it was like right past the hook, the line snapped.
Yeah. Yeah, it was and the other thing that I thought was unique about this thing is he had his spikes on his fins were basically nails.
Yeah.
Like they were
3 inches
3
long,
inch nails.
easy.
Yeah. So we ended up getting them into the basket. And then we kept fishing. I think we caught a couple more small little white bass. Mm-hmm. And then it was like 9:30 and we decided to call it.
I think it was the one after that I decided to keep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, he's right at 10.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we ended up with just only one little white bass in the cooler. But I literally got home and I'm like, well, I just got to go ahead and deal with this now. So I scaled him. And then as I scaled him, and then I didn't even fillet him. He was so small. I'm like, let me just find a way to cook this thing whole. So I chopped off his head, kind of slit the belly, pulled out the guts. He's sitting there, and I was doing this in my kitchen. I'm like, I might as well just throw him in some butter right now. So it's like probably 11:30 or midnight, and I'm just sitting there in basketball shorts, shirtless in my kitchen, like, I'm gonna cook a fish.
I might as well just eat them. Yeah. Well,
I did. And it was actually great.
Yeah.
Lot of bones in those little things,
Yeah.
but the flavor's very good.
So before that, we were driving back and we're like, hey, let's cut up this fish because I don't think he's gonna fit in my cooler whole. So we ended up pulling over to a QT.
Yeah.
And in the back of Pliny's truck, we ended up cutting up this catfish. And man, there was we waited. There was 2 pounds of meat that came off of this catfish.
Yeah, and that was us kind of doing a
quick job,
down and dirty, quick fillet. Like we weren't trying to get every little bit. And so there was probably another pound of meat that if we were really picky, we could have got off of that thing.
Yeah.
And it was thick. I mean, those fillets were what, 1.5 inches?
Yeah. Yeah, they were big fillets. It was. I showed my wife the next day, and she's like, "Holy smokes! Like one of those fillets is bigger than the other fish that you guys have caught whole."
Yeah, I was like, this bag of the meat from this one catfish, that's a limit of white bass.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, it's unreal.
But
so
it was. We came. Do you want to talk about cooking it up here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So this was, I guess, 2 nights ago. Came over and we just cooked it up here, and we just kept it super simple. Just cast iron, of course, full of canola oil. And what was it? It wasn't Zatarain's. It was Tony's. Tony's brand.
I'm staring at the box
breading.
right now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the back of the box, so I couldn't read it.
and some people like dip them in egg, and they make it all complicated. I just like dipping it in milk. And you had whole milk, which actually works out great. The fattier, the better. Cream actually is probably the best. Cream or buttermilk.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Whole milk is great, but like skim milk, it's not going to really hold it that well.
Just as a reminder, I have 3 kids, so the whole milk is like a necessity.
Yeah, you'll go through a lot.
There's like 2 in my main fridge and then another one in our garage fridge.
Whereas I'll have like a carton that'll be like, oh man, I hope I get through this before it goes bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just use the whole milk, kind of just dip it in that, and then just throw it in a bag full of the Tony's pre-seasoned breading stuff. And then we keep it cold, so then we throw it in the hot oil, and that helps it stay pretty crispy. And man, it turned out
out really good. And the last time we did it, I don't know, it's probably a month ago. We had caught some on the jug lines, and I don't even remember what did we use? Just cornmeal?
No,
we thought we had cornmeal in my house. We didn't.
Your wife was being very sweet and helpful, and she said, "Here's the cornmeal," and it was like cornbread muffin mix.
Yeah. So
which is mostly cornmeal, but it has baking powder and a bunch of other like. It's
so
intended to rise
get like a little.
bread.
You get like a little chunk of fish with a whole like hush puppy around it.
Yeah,
you know?
It was like fish flavored hush puppies.
Yeah,
but we had a good bread meal.
That was right. Yeah, it was definitely a carb loading night.
Yeah. Well, and now you're like, yeah, all I'm eating is meat.
Yeah, I'm on a carnivore diet, and today I broke that diet to eat some fried fish, and it was delicious.
Well, you broke it with the breading on the fish.
That's right.
So I mean,
the fish is still legit.
Technically, you broke it, but in spirit, I think you're all in. Mm-hmm. I mean, chowing down on catfish that you caught 2
days ago.
Yeah, I think that counts as carnivore, man.
Yeah, it's and it was pretty delicious, man. Oh, and we whipped up the tartar sauce.
And I didn't realize that.
So I guess I cheated here too because I had some mayonnaise.
Yeah,
with pickle juice.
Yeah. So I didn't realize. I always, tartar sauce. I guess is just a marketing name, but I didn't realize it's just mayonnaise with pickles and what is it? Onions.
Yeah,
or
shallots, some lime juice, and a little bit of Dijon mustard. That's it.
Yeah, and so I'm just like.
And I had everything but the shallots, so we cut up some pickles, had some mustard, had some not lime, lemon juice. And it turned out pretty good.
It was great. I was surprised at how good it is. Too. If somebody was like, well, I'm going to mix some pickles in the mayonnaise, I'd be like,
I'm not eating that.
You drinking?
Yeah, exactly.
But it actually was awesome. And then put a little bit of lemon on the fish. And it was a reminder to me. I really enjoy fried catfish, and I think it gets a bad rap. So I'm an apologist for the catfish.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. So I've never really fished a lot in my life. Like I've always done fishing, but it's never been like something I focus on. So ever since Pliny got this boat, he's been going out, quite a bit. And then I've been going out with him some, and just getting out there and finding another animal or another species that's on this earth that we can go and go capture or hunt or fish or whatever you want to call it. Right. That we can use our skill set to go and find and gather and then eat. Is so cool to me. Like just the philosophical side of it is like, hey, the meal that we had tonight was because we went and got in your boat, went out, caught something, brought it back, cooked and ate it.
And for me, the catfish is kind of like the ace in the hole.
Yeah.
It's like you could put me anywhere in the South, and if I'm hungry, I'm like that would be my number one survival strategy.
Oh, for sure.
I'm pretty confident that I could catch a catfish.
Your hands are just going to smell for 3 days after.
True. But like any lake, like I pretty much know how to catch a catfish. And then, are the crappie biting? Can we find them? Can we find a school of white bass? That's always what's up in the air. But the catfish is almost always like, yeah, if I'm going after catfish, I can get one.
And in fact, I think
sometimes you're going after other stuff, and then
I think every time we've gone out, we've caught a catfish.
To the point that it's almost like a meme on the series that I did a still frame of the first video, and I'm holding up a channel cat with my right hand. And then the second one, I didn't even think about it. I'm holding up a catfish, and I'm like, that's almost the exact same photo, except for the backdrop.
That's right.
And this time we caught a catfish. I don't
know that we could have held this one up with one hand without it slipping out.
No. But I'm trying to think. I almost feel like every time I've taken this boat out, I don't think I've ever not gotten a catfish.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
maybe like the very first time, or that one time where we were just dead in the water.
Where we were dead in the water about 10 minutes in. Yeah. And Eli started catching minnows.
Yeah, and then we're like, well, you got the biggest fish.
That's right. Yeah, he thought that was the best thing in the world. He talks about the minnows for days.
Yep. So, man, catfish can be really good, and I think it gets a bad rap because there are farmed catfish there's some sketchy stuff there. It's not the healthiest stuff. And I don't think it's as flavorful, but when you catch a fresh catfish, man, it's just the lake provides.
Well, so this is something that Pliny shared tonight that I did not know, and I think it's really interesting. I'll probably butcher it so you can come in and correct it. But when people are talking about like because I asked Pliny, I said, hey, what temperature or how do you know it's cooked fully, right? A catfish, because we're frying them. And the rating, I guess, on the packages of, hey, it needs to be cooked to this temperature is to kill the bacteria in any type of meat. But that is based on the handling of that meat, whether it's fish or red meat or white meat, whatever it is, all the way through the production process. So on conveyor belts and all that. And he made a good point of, hey, when you're catching it or killing it in the field, it's different because there's not as much bacteria because there's not as much handling throughout that process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true for just about any meat. I mean, there's some exceptions like, rabbits can be bit by fleas that, can give rabbits tularemia, or bears and pigs can have trichinosis.
Chickenanus.
Daniel can never remember trichinosis, so he calls it, he's like, what is that thing? Chickenanus. Chickenanus. Yeah, so bears have chickenanus, apparently. But all that, yes, that does naturally occur from what they eat and from parasites. It's like little parasites in the meat. But most meat, there's bacteria in it, but guess what? There's bacteria in your gut. There's E. coli in your gut naturally. But the whole thing is right when you fillet a fish or cut the meat off the animal, that's generally the cleanest and healthy it is. And then once it gets packaged, once it gets thrown in a cooler, once it gets put on a conveyor belt, chopped up, handled, moved around, packaged, every time you touch it, move it, every time it sits,
freeze it, unfreeze it,
the bacteria is growing and growing and growing. And so that's where a lot of these temperatures that we hear, 130 for red meat, 165 for pork, a lot of that stuff comes from the commercial side where meat is packaged, shipped. And so once it goes through that whole process and you get it through the grocery store, they're just assuming that it's covered in bacteria. And that's for the type of bacteria and type of parasites that are in that meat. That's how you have to kill it. But most meat fresh from the field is pretty clean. And I'm sure somebody's probably going to get on here and listen to this and contradict everything I'm saying. But there's a lot of meat that's very clean, and I think that's part of why like fresh fish tastes so much better.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's been no rot, no decay, no bacteria, no extra cleaning that's involved, or no overcooking that's involved just to do that. So I think, it's not recommended to eat catfish as sushi.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people eat tuna as sushi or salmon, but I think the conditions of catfish, I mean, it's still just a fish.
Well, and I think it goes back to just the cleaner meat that is when you get it in the wild versus going in the grocery store and picking it up.
Yeah.
Right. The meat's going to be cleaner. It's going to be fresher. It's going to be 2 days old versus who knows how long. Right?
And there's definitely it's very true that there's definitely a thing to like cold water fish and fish that are small and active. Those tend to be cleaner and better to eat. That's why like trout is a better option probably than catfish. Or like shark is the worst because it's big. It lives in tropical waters. It eats all these little fish and accumulates mercury and every little toxin that's in every little fish. It builds that up. But all that to say, even this catfish, man, the meat was clean. We cut out the bloodline. That's something that a lot of people who are like, oh, this tastes fishy. It tastes gross. It tastes oily. They don't cut out that red bloodline. And that's where that nasty flavor is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this thing was, dude, I thought it was an A+ night. Both nights, right? The night we caught it and the night that we ate it. And this goes back to, we did a podcast, I don't know, a couple of months ago where we talked about the different stages of food, and we were talking about, rifle hunting versus bow hunting. Mm-hmm. And when I come back to this, we spent, I think we met at Shields around 6 or 6:30, and we got home probably respectively around 11, right? So we spent, 4.5 hours out there, then cleaned it and all this
including
stuff.
Buying bait, rigging the boat,
right.
Launching the boat, all that stuff.
All that kind of stuff to get back and basically cook a meal that we could have gone down to the grocery store in about 20 minutes, picked it up, brought it back and cooked it. But the meaning behind it is so much more to go, hey man, we caught that fish. Here's a great story about it. We caught an 11-pound fish on a 6-pound line with a tiny hook.
Yeah.
Brought it into the boat, got it all on video, which is kind of cool. And then we cut it up in a QT parking lot, and we fried it up and ate it.
And it's interesting with catfish too. It's kind of like hog hunting. It's one of those things that is a true crossover. Very few. Oh, dog's barking.
That's my dog.
Very few game meats. Like you can't buy venison commercially, or when you do, you're not actually buying white-tailed deer. You're buying like red deer or something like that.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
So when you have like venison chili at like a restaurant, it's not actually whitetail?
Correct.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's usually fallow or red deer or something like that.
Something that's an exotic that's not game animal.
There is no commercial meat hunting of whitetail deer.
I had no idea.
And now there may be like some very specialty license things where some places a game ranch and they can take so many of their own ear tag deer. Like there's probably something like that.
Right, but the vast majority is.
Yeah, because think when you take your venison down to the processor and you look on all the packages, it says not for retail sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's actually, it dates historically back to like, if you look at how the bison were wiped out. It was meat hunters who would just kill all these bison for the two most valuable parts, the tongue and the hide. And they just decimated the bison because of that. And so they basically said, we don't want that to happen to any other wild game species. So let's allow people to hunt for themselves, but not commercially. And so that's all native game.
I had no idea.
But then there are some crossovers, like wild pigs technically are exotics. You know, they're the same species as domestic pigs, but just when they go wild, you can go hunt them. So obviously there's no restrictions there. It's the same meat that you can buy in the store. I guess if you were to look at a DNA level, same number of chromosomes, same species. And then catfish, I don't think wild caught catfish can be sold, but farm catfish can be sold. And maybe that varies
that may
state
be
by
by
state.
state. Because in Florida, I remember we ran into some guys. We were down there doing a peacock bass fly fishing trip. And we ran into these guys that literally, I don't even, if I told you this, we're in the Glades. And they were out there. There was probably 4 boats. And they were out there real early. And we're like, hey, what are y'all doing? They're like, oh, we're catching catfish. And we're like, oh, what are you doing with it? We're selling it to the supermarket.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. So well, I do think it varies state by state.
Yeah.
But I think by and large, that makes sense that you can't just go and sell that stuff to the store.
Well, and it's definitely different with fish too, because if you look at, whether you're doing it commercially or like all fish, they're coming from the water, right?
right.
So it's just, is this a commercial boat or a private, sport fishing boat? But you can't, you definitely can't buy largemouth bass in a store around here. You can't buy white bass. You can't buy crappie. You can't. And you're right. It probably varies state by state. There are probably some states where you can buy crappie or bluegill, and somebody has a special permit to do that. But
that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that. And by the way, there goes my dog barking. Sorry about that.
But I mean, catfish you can buy pretty cheap in a grocery store. But when you go out there, catch it yourself, you have a story, it just makes it that much more
meaningful. It makes
meaning.
it that much better. Yeah. Especially when you take a picture of the catfish with a Miller Lite right beside it and show how big this catfish is.
Well, it just makes it mean something rather than just being like, yep, this is a massive flesh that I exchanged currency for.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of one story. So we've talked about the Neil guy that I shot quite a bit on different podcasts. And it was funny tonight. So my wife is out on a girls' night. So Pliny and I were here frying up fish, and I had my 3 kids with me. I've got a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And that Neil guy mount has been in my house for 6-8 months now.
Yeah.
It's been here for a while. And my 3-year-old's like, Pliny, come here. I got to show you something. And she walks out, and she's almost 4. So
and it was so like cute and sweet. She walked me over to the living room and then pointed up, and she's like, Neil guy.
Yeah. It's so funny. But it goes back to what you just said of there's a story behind the meat that we eat, right? And it's not just going to the I have no problem. In fact, on this carnivore diet, I buy a lot of meat from the store because I have to. I'm eating like 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds of meat a day. But there's more to, hey, I know where that meat came from. I know where it was sourced. I know every hand that's ever touched it.
Yeah.
Human hand that's ever touched that wild meat. And I get to eat it and enjoy it and remember the story.
What's funny is not on the meat side. I have like a little patio garden that is just struggling this year in this heat. It is not going well. And a little tomato plant that I've gotten like 3 tomatoes off of. And yeah, you can buy tomatoes in every grocery store in America. But it's almost comical when I look at, I bought a $4 plant to harvest 50 cents worth of fruit off of it. But
it's like fishing with shrimp.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a $7.99 thing to catch a $2.99 thing.
Exactly. But even like the effort that I put in to, plant that little tomato plant, water it, watch it grow, and then I see a little yellow flower on there, and then I watch it bud, and then I'm like, oh, there's a tomato. Oh, the birds and squirrels haven't gotten it. Okay, I can finally oh, it's a green tomato. Oh, now it's a red tomato and I can pick it. And then when I finally get to cook something with that tomato, it means something and it's cool and it's exciting. And I think this is it's the same thing, but with a conscious living animal, it just makes it mean even more.
Well, dude, and I honestly think that's like, if you look at human nature, like just if you look at socioeconomic trends lately, like you read all these stories about these people that were like making a ton of money in New York City or LA or whatever, and they gave it all up to go start a farm, right? In Idaho, right? Or wherever. And I think there's like this innate human longing to like be close to the land, right? Yeah. And that's both on like the farming side of it as well as the hunting and fishing side of it, being close to your food. Like we're so disconnected when you go to the grocery store or when you go out to eat. You don't even go to the grocery store. Someone's preparing it for you. We're so disconnected from that. And I truly believe since getting into hunting, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, that sense of like, man, there's more connection to what's powering my body.
Yeah, and it's like what's this primal thing of what's real, what's meaningful, what are the elements of life made up of compared to this artificial world that we live in. I mean, I do marketing for an insurance type product and you sell software.
Right.
And we both are on the phone and on a screen all day long.
Yeah.
And just to be able to get out, sit in a crappy little aluminum boat, 14-foot dinky little thing, bobbing up and down in the water, pulling in a catfish and then saying, I got my own food today.
That's right.
In this fake superficial world, I did something that means something and that's going to nourish me, and I am excited about it. It's going to entertain me, nourish me, excite me, tell a story, and mean something all at once.
In 108-degree weather.
Yeah.
You're right, though, man. That's the whole thing. Like, it's funny. Eli, my son, really wanted to come fishing with us this time. We said no because it was just too hot. But he sees it at a young age, and he doesn't even, like, he'll eat every time we cook something. He'll eat some of it with his mac and cheese or whatever he's eating.
Yeah.
But he sees, like, just there's something about being stuck in concrete all day and then getting outside of that.
Yeah.
And making an impact on your body, your family's body, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I kind of feel bad because every time he's come out on the boat, we've had all kinds of trouble, and it's just, and like
we've had malfunctions.
Malfunctions. And then when you were saying he was bummed that he wasn't going to come, and I'm like, well, maybe he's just bad luck. Maybe you should tell him to stay home and read the story of Jonah.
Yeah. It's I don't know. There's something cool about it, man. There's definitely something cool about it.
So I think we've probably got a couple more fishing trips in the rest of the summer. It's still smoking hot, but so I got to admit, even right now, you bought all those minnows, and right now I have that cooler with the little bubbler in it. It's in my living room, keeping all those little guys alive because it's like 30 minnows in there. So
well, and here's the thing: I went to the
last.
So this is a life lesson that I've learned that if I can impart this on anyone, it's a really good life lesson. Anywhere you go, make friends with people. Like, just make friends with people. Just have small talk, and don't make the transaction a transaction. Make it something fun.
Yeah.
So I met this young kid at Shields, and I said, "Hey, we're talking about fishing." He's in one of the lower level bass fishing tournaments. I don't know if I had to put an age, he's probably 17, 18 years old. We're talking about fishing as Pliny's kind of messing with the boat in the parking lot. And I'm like, hey, I need 24 minnows. I think we probably got about 50 minnows out of that. And it cost $4.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a really, really minor example. But I still am of the firm belief people will do things extraordinary for people they like. Right?
Yeah.
And just be nice to folks, talk to them, get to know them. And it's not even about what you can get. It's just about building relationships.
Yeah. Oh, and it made it more enjoyable too. And,
yeah.
And yeah, even if he did give you some extra minnows, like we were talking about this earlier, that when you go to buy bait, you intentionally have to walk by all the bows, all the new rifles.
Oh, I almost bought a new Christensen.
The Christensen display rack, the Night Force rack, the Vortex rack, all the ammo, all the reloading supplies. The bait is back by the bathroom.
Yeah.
So,
and I had to use the bathroom too.
So if you're going there to get $1.99 a dozen minnows, it's like when I go to Buc-ee's to buy ice for 79 cents for 10 pounds because it's the only place where you can do that. And then I walk out with $20 worth of junk food. I'm
or
like,
it's
what
like
happened?
when you go to Costco to get pizza for your kids and you walk out with a $500 bill.
Yeah. And you're like,
how did that happen?
I guess we're stocked up for a while.
That's
and
right.
I think we bought a trampoline.
And I have an elliptical and it's getting delivered next week.
So I think we've got a couple more fishing trips left for this summer. And then, man, this summer, everything has just flown by because we're...
Dude, 2 weeks till my kids go back to school.
Dang.
Yeah.
Dang. And we're about to put in for draws. We've kind of calculated that out. Well, we may talk about that on another episode.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to do another episode about our hunting goals because that's one that I did not do last year. And I realized the difference of when I put my goals out there publicly, even if y'all don't listen to them or don't care, just the fact that I put them out there and stated them publicly makes them mean more to me. Versus last year, it was kind of like, oh, let's see what happened. And then it was probably the worst year I've had in a while.
Last year was a weird year.
It was weird. I mean, I still got a lot of meat, but I passed a couple dinky bucks. There were places I want to try that I never tried. It was weird. Your Neil guy was definitely the highlight of last year for sure.
Yeah, but outside of that, we shot a couple of does.
Yeah.
Like I think I shot 2.
Yeah.
And you shot 2 or 3.
I shot 3, but I mean, to be honest, like I passed up bucks and I went out there, but then it kind of got down to, I'm like, well, I've got tags. I need to get meat. Let me get some little does. And it was like going to the grocery store at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still cool, but even the one I shot at 310 yards, it was still just like, okay, line it up, knock it down, throw it in the truck. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't have the adventure hype that I like in a lot of stuff. And I'm not saying I'm disappointed. I know I sound probably like a spoiled brat when I'm like, oh yeah, just shot a deer.
I only shot a deer at 310.
I only shot 3 deer and how boring. No, it's just, it didn't mean as much to me as some of the other hunts where we've like hiked way back and we found a deer and we got it with a bow. And like when you're really doing it the most challenging and the adventurous route, and it's not even about the most challenging, it's just about a way that means something to you. This last year, it was a lot of just grocery getting.
Well, and I mean, to that point, the 2 does that I shot, there was a side of like excitement there because I had my son with me the first time in the blind, and we shot 2 does together, and he had a blast. But it was still, it was 80-yard shot and 100-yard shot with a Creedmoor, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, line it up, knock it down. And again, we had a great time. My son had an absolute blast.
And just to throw this in here real quick,
Yeah.
anybody who knocks the Creedmoor as like, it's not an effective deer hunting round or
You're
whatever,
insane.
you can't shoot.
No, yeah, I totally agree. Like the Creedmoor round.
Now, if you're talking about elk or some really big game, I get it.
So here's
But
my
whitetail.
Here's my philosophy. Anything in anything in Texas outside of a Neil guy and an aoudad, because I mean the audads, those are tough animals. The
Or
Neil
an
guy,
elk, but there's no elk in Texas, right?
Yeah, except for right by New Mexico. Any like native Texas species, you can take with a 6.5 Creedmoor all day long.
Yeah.
All day. I shot a wild pig. You just have to have good shot placement. If you've got an accurate rifle, it doesn't matter. You're just poking a hole either in its face or in its lungs and heart.
Yeah.
And they'll go down.
And what's funny is a lot of the people who hate on the Creedmoor and like, oh yeah, those are the man bun hipster whatever. They love the 7mm odd 8.
Yeah.
Which is, if you look at them side by side, you're talking about a 0.5 millimeter and actually worse ballistic efficiency.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I learned about the Creedmoor, and we're off on a tangent now.
Oh, yeah.
And this is like my favorite topic because I love shooting rifles. The thing about the Creedmoor is like, I can shoot a dime from 100 yards with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's unreal.
Yeah.
And like consistently.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that and you go, like, dude, you could take an elk down you could take an elk down with a Creedmoor all day long. It's all about shot placement.
Yeah, I know people who have done it.
I wouldn't do it from 400 yards or 300 yards because I wouldn't feel comfortable that with all the variables that come into play there, if I miss by 3 inches, is it still as lethal of a shot? Probably not. That's where I'd rather have a bigger caliber. But in Texas, like there's really nothing that I'd shoot a 200-pound buck with a Creedmoor all day long.
Yeah, and it'll do it. It'll do it for sure. And man, we got off on a tangent.
Really
did. I don't even know how we got there.
I don't either. But when we re-listen to this, we'll figure it out. So hunting goals, I think that's probably another episode.
Yeah. And this year, hunting goals, we've had a lot of drama with properties.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time we're entering into a season
with nothing.
So, but I feel real confident about this year. I don't know why, I just do.
I kind of do too. And I don't know if it's ego, if it's desperate. It's like
desperation and pride.
I don't know. There's a lot of, I see this with myself in business with a lot of things where I'm like, well, when I really need to get it done and I don't have any resources, I somehow find a way to get it done. And it makes me a procrastinator a lot of times because I have that trait of like, oh, when I need to get it done, I can always do well under pressure. Yeah. And I feel like I'm kind of in that doing well under pressure, counting on that a little too much. But I had that lease in South Texas that there was a lot of drama, man. It was ugly. It got ugly.
Yeah, I wasn't even part of it, but just the stories was ugly.
And I don't think I was any part of the drama really, but it was just watching stuff get so bitter between a landowner who may or may not be bipolar, and it just he cared about the cattle and the land and not really about the hunting. And
which, by the way, is totally fine, but don't have a lease program then.
Yeah, like you have to assign it. Yeah, that at least that level of value. But yeah. Anyway, they decided there was a lot of drama. I pretty much committed that I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to re-up on here. And then they basically told everybody to get the hell out.
So that play. And by the way, what I loved about that property, there's two things. Like the deer were little, right?
Tiny, but they were everywhere.
They were everywhere. The thing I loved about that property, that's where I shot my first doe ever. That's kind of cool, but that's not what I loved about it.
Yeah.
What I loved about it was the long range aspect. So we had 1,000-yard range up against the berm, which we've talked about many times, which is great to sight in a rifle and then have fun, right?
Yep.
The second thing I loved is you could hike around and shoot pigs. And like every time we hiked around, we'd see a pig. And it's just so fun to do that.
And it was this really fun combination of still hunting and Western style spot and stock. It was a little bit of each. So it's just slow walk and then glass and then slow walk and then glass. But there are spots where all you can see is 15 yards because you're in just like a cedar choke-tail hole.
Yeah.
And then there are spots where it opens up and you can see a half mile.
Yeah.
And
it was a cool spot for sure.
And there were a lot of rock pigs, we called them down there.
Yeah.
Just
long noses.
Yeah.
Trying to get into the ground.
It was almost like a different breed of pigs, but it was almost like how I view catfishing. Like, I'm like, yeah, you can put me anywhere in the South and I can probably catch a catfish. Down there, I'm like, dude, muzzleloader, bow, rifle, put a weapon in my hands.
9mm pistol.
Yep, that happened.
Yep.
And give me long enough and I'll get a pig.
Yep.
Even to the point where, like, I remember I was driving down and I had my little, like, lever action Marlin sitting in the seat beside me, and then I saw a pig run across the road and I just hopped out and ran after it and I got it.
Yeah.
But that place, there were tons of pigs. Not a lot of big ones. You probably killed the biggest one down there.
Oh, the one I shot in the neck with my 270?
Yeah, the bacon in the sun.
The bacon in the sun. I have that skull. Pliny was such a good friend. I shot that pig. I was so excited because he was a big pig and he was walking, and we have a video, and I shot him in the neck. He just dropped. And he had decent tusks on him.
Yeah.
And we ended up cleaning them up and leaving. This, I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago, something like that, 3 years ago maybe.
Goodness.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was when we were in our early 30s.
Oh man. Oh.
But like, I don't know, it was probably 2 months later, Pliny comes over to the house, and he's like, hey, I got something for you in the back of my truck. And he's got this like Amazon box. I'm like, I mean, I know you work at True Glow and all, but like, I don't need anything. And he opens it up, and like literally, I was like a kid in a candy shop. He's got the skull of that pig that I shot in the neck because he had put it in an ant pile and deboned it and then bleached it, and it's sitting in my office right now. It's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
And all I did for that thing is I just took after we cleaned it, I put a piece of wire, and I always just keep a spool of wire in the back of my truck.
I do too now.
I think it's just a full redneck. Like every redneck's got a spool of wire in the back of the truck.
You need it for something.
You will not believe the number of times that comes in handy till you have it.
Yeah.
And so I literally just put a piece of wire like through the eye hole and tied it around a cedar tree and put it in an ant bed. Yeah. And then came back 2 weeks later, and it was pretty much cleaned off. It was still a little funky, so I threw it in a pickle bucket full of bleach water.
Yep.
And then after that, turned out pretty good.
It did turn out pretty good. So back to the story, like that place is gone, unfortunately.
Yep.
And it was 6 hours away, but that was a fun place. And then we had this place down in Iran that a friend of mine, he had an oil and gas operation out there, and it was 400 acres, and it was I say beautiful country. It's all in the eye of the beholder. It's like mesas and mesquites and cedars.
High desert.
I think it's so cool. Like it is. It reminds you of like those Western movies.
For sure.
Where the guys are riding their horses and they're looking over the mesa like, oh, well, we got to get, 6 more miles or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a couple miles from the Pecos River. Elevation, 2,000?
Yeah.
1,800, somewhere around there.
Rattlesnakes everywhere, although we never saw any.
Yeah, but it's like...
We saw a horny toad down there.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
That was super cool, actually.
Yeah. We saw an elk down there.
Yep.
It was on a high fence.
Oh, no. Remember, there's no elk in Texas.
Oh, that's right.
Right. But yeah, down there, it's like you couldn't hang a tree stand anywhere if you wanted to. Like, that just seems silly.
And if you did, you'd be about 2 feet off the ground.
Yeah. It's just cedar trees and yuccas and little scrawny mesquites. Even the mesquites don't get big.
But it's such a cool property. And when the first time we went out there, it was snowing. I shot a couple of deer. I shot one, and it's like the scenario you always dream of as a deer hunter, where you're like, I wish I could shoot it and track it on like a white floor. And it was snowing, so I shot it and tracked it on a white floor, which was kind of cool.
And 3 inches of snow in Texas is a big deal.
That's a lot.
So
of snow.
I know you like New York and Michigan hunters are like,
They're laughing at us right now.
What's the deal?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then we went out there a couple more. That's where I shot those 2 does last year with my son. So unfortunately, my buddy ended up. No, not unfortunately. It's a fantastic thing for him with everything going on in the economy when oil and gas up. He ended up selling the property.
Yeah.
So Pliny and I right now are still trying to figure out if there's an opportunity for us to hunt out there from the new landowners. I think it's a 50-50, like at best.
Yeah.
There's a toss up there. Likelihood is probably not.
And we're in a difficult spot because you bought those pop-up blinds. We each bought some feeders. We each bought some cameras. I built those stands.
Feeder.
We got a lot of gear out there. And we're now at a point where, like, well, with gas being, goodness, $4 a gallon, like, even just getting out there to...
It's $500 just to get all our gear.
Just to get stuff.
Yeah.
Much less do we keep on feeding? What do we do? We're in an awkward spot. And so, I don't know. It'll be an interesting thing this year with either we'll have permission, we're going to go down there, we'll be like, okay, cool, minimal gear, get a doe, clean it up, whatever. Or it'll be nothing.
Or it's nothing. We go down there, get our stuff, and we just head home. So that spot is a toss up right now, and then the rest is just kind of public land draws right now.
Yeah. Well, there was another permission place that we had, but this last year, it was a cattle operation in West Texas, and they were struggling with the cattle operation, and they cut all the trees and. Then, man, this has been a bad drought year. The whole place is just dust and dirt. And I have only one camera running out there, and I'm not seeing anything.
Have you ever killed a deer out there?
Yeah.
How many?
One.
Just one, a little doe?
It was one of the weird combinations where in Texas you can have there are some counties where you can get your 13-inch or greater buck, and then you still have another buck tag, but the only way to get another buck is a spike.
Oh, okay.
And I shot a spike, and I still feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that deer shouldn't have died, but legally he was the only deer that I saw that I could have killed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but either way, the point is like you've been hunting out there for a number of years.
Yeah, and I've taken one deer off.
And there's been pigs. It's a great dove spot, and hopefully we have the opportunity to go out there and
good duck spot.
Yeah, it's a good duck spot. But the bigger game definitely is lacking a bit.
Yeah.
So we've got draws. I'm excited about the draws that we're looking at right now.
This is the most optimistic I've ever been for the Texas draw, because looking at this going in, I'm like, there are places where I've got 5 points in multiple categories. I've got 4 points in multiple categories.
Yeah.
And so we're now viewing it very carefully in terms of, well, I don't want to apply for this hunt because I'll for sure get drawn for this one place that's not as good.
Yeah, I could shoot a white-tailed doe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, and it's an hour from my house, but do I want to waste that versus an exotic that's 5 hours away?
And so we're trying to be very calculated about, well, when we put in for, that white-tailed doe tag, we're not saying don't do it, but let's make sure it's a place where there's also exotic potential, or it's a harder to draw place. So there's a chance we'll just get another point.
Yeah.
But even if it's the doe tag that gets us in the door, it unlocks other opportunity other than just the doe tag.
Dude, the one I'm excited about that we're going to put in for, and it's like a 12 and 8,000 odds. So it's probably not going to happen this year.
Oh, at the Jimsbach or the Scimitar?
No, the Paladero Canyon with the Aoudad.
That one's, a little bit better, but
I just still think that would be so cool to get drawn down there, and you're literally hiking through Big Bend. And we were talking about this. You got that Savage 300 Win Mag.
Well, so there's 2 different ones. There's Paladero, and then there's a couple stuff around Big Bend, which is
Wasn't Paladero the one that was the Aoudad though?
Yes.
Yeah.
But then there's also Black Gap, Elephant Mountain, stuff like that. But there are a couple of these hunts, there are only 3 of them that they don't let you put in as an individual.
Right.
Because they basically say 4-wheel drive required, it's so rugged.
And they even say lift kit is recommended.
Yeah, you can't go in there by yourself. You have to put in as at least 2 people. What's interesting is there are some people out in Idaho and Wyoming who just do that stuff all the time.
Right.
And so it's just most Texas hunters who are used to sitting in a box blind hunting over feeder. It's a little different.
Well, I think the heat down there is a little different than Idaho as well.
True.
So you get dehydrated real quick out there. But the thing I'm excited about is that's the opportunity potentially to see and or knock down an Aoudad from 400 yards.
Yeah.
And that even if it doesn't happen, the thrill of thinking hey man, we could be hiking around and see one of those things, one of those little Barbary sheep running around somewhere and take a shot at them. And we were talking about this, even if it's you taking the shot and I'm videotaping it or vice versa, just being part of that experience, I think would be so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
And it was funny for us looking at the draw opportunities and us trying to synergize on all this stuff. Because you were looking at it and you're okay, this one has really good success rates, and you're being very pragmatic about it. And there's a lot of these things where I'm this one, it says you have to cross a river and then hike 3 miles, and it's muzzleloader only. And you're why would you do that?
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm
a 5% success rate.
And I'm God, no, that'll slow everybody else down. And it's just so weird and interesting.
Yeah.
I'm that's for sure the one I want to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the cool thing is the mix between what we're looking at.
You're pragmatic, and I'm the romanticized adventure.
Marketing versus sales. I got to go get my quota done.
And I just want a painting.
That's right. But I think, man, we came up, so we haven't put them in yet. I think we have some really cool opportunities, at least.
Yep.
Right. And it, who knows, these things, when you get drawn for them, the last 2 years we got drawn for federal land. It's tough hunting, but it's more of an adventure than just sitting in a box blind with a rifle. And I love sitting in a box blind with a rifle, but it's more adventurous than that.
Yeah. And I think we view it as, there's almost standard level hunting, and then there's all these other things that you can do on top of that. We're not against standard level hunting.
No.
We're not against catching the catfish.
Not at all. I'll do that all day.
But anytime you can do other stuff, it just adds to the fun factor.
Yeah. It's like the squirrel suits we were talking about earlier. If you jump off a mountain with a squirrel suit, that's pretty cool. If you jump off a mountain with a squirrel suit and then you go through like a little eye of another mountain and you don't splash yourself on the side of it, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a little lower consequence.
But, a little bit lower consequence, yeah.
But all that to say, we're looking forward to the draw stuff. We may do an episode on that. Just going through that. I'm still not sure if how much we want to reveal there. Well, we've already talked a little bit about the strategy, but before then, we've got more fishing. We've got some dove hunting. We leased a dove spot. Oh, we do.
That's actually true. We do have a spot. We have a dove spot. We're not blanking this year. Now, we could shoot 100 doves and get about the pound or the size of a backstrap of a deer, but
it's like, think about the number of doves that we have to kill to get the meat off of that catfish.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I will say this. I equate dove hunting to fishing. And we were talking about this the other day on the
Dove hunting is the white bass and or bluegill fishing.
It is. And the thing I love about it is you're literally sitting there with a rifle. You can talk. You're hanging out with buddies.
Or shotgun.
Shotgun. I don't advocate drinking. You drink after, right? Where with fishing, you can drink during. But you're sitting there hanging out with friends, talking. It's not like the strategic, like sit there and be quiet. It's like, hey, there's one flying, shoot it. And I just think it's a fun time. I think it's a great like opener to hunting season.
Dude, you know what's so cool is like that's what got me into all this stuff. And it was
me too. That's what your dad invited me the first time. That's what got me into it.
Well, and I was just like the bird dog for my dad. Like he had a bird dog and it was gone. And he was like, well, I got a kid now. So
yeah, Pliny, go grab it.
Yeah. So I was the bird dog and then eventually got to where like, okay, I'll get to shoot and carry a gun every once in a while. And then, so I killed a dove with a Beretta 20 gauge that was my granddad's, and that's still the same gun that I hunt with today.
Is it really?
Yeah, and so like I've got that other 12 gauge that I bust out every once in a while, but it's that Mossberg 930 where I'm just like, that's just like a Harbor Freight hammer. Yeah. Like it gets the job done. It's reliable. It ain't pretty, but it works for sure.
Yeah.
Whereas that Beretta, I'm like, yeah, I can shoot a 20 gauge really well. I'm not necessarily like 20 gauge is better than 12 gauge, but I shot my very first dove with that gun. It still works well. I can still keep it going. And so it's like dove hunting kind of has this like special place in my heart.
Yeah. I'm excited about it this year. I think dove hunting is one of those special things where it's just fun. It's like pure raw fun. It's not like hunting there's some anxiety that builds. Not anxiety is not probably the right word. There's some suspense that builds.
Yeah.
Where you're hunting hard, you're doing all the right things, and you could or could not get something, right? Whereas with dove hunting, you just kind of go out and you have a good time. It's a great way to enter into the season.
Well, and I think about it compared to like we were looking at for the first time putting in for Wyoming, just an out of state draw, and so in getting into that process, man, it's so pronghorn. So it's so intimidating looking at like, okay, here's the permitting process, and here's the draw odds, and here's all the different areas.
And by the way, here's an entire state that you know nothing about. Chop it up and figure out where to go hunt.
Whereas dove hunting, it's like, here's a field that had grain in it. Sit on the edge, just relax, have a good time, and if a bird flies over, shoot it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and if it doesn't, you know what? It was still a fun day to get out and take your shotgun for a walk.
And just exactly, and just appreciate getting out there. So I know sometimes we say, oh, we appreciate getting out there. And sometimes it's almost like a consolation prize to saying, well, we didn't get anything.
Yeah. But it's better than sitting inside at your office desk all day. And it's better than looking at concrete.
Yeah. And man, like I know so many people, like grown ass men who play video games. And if that's your thing, I guess whatever. I'm not going to totally scorn you for it, but
just minor.
Yeah. But just the idea of like get out and appreciate what's around you and all this public land and beauty. And even if you don't get anything, like at least you got out there versus sitting at home playing video games or watching Netflix or just.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But like get out there and experience what God gave us. Like God gave us this beautiful world with all these amazing creatures to go learn about, to go hunt, to go eat. I mean, I think it's so cool to see like what's there.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know. I don't know about you. When I go and play golf or when I do something where I can just literally take my phone and turn it off for a number of hours, there's something special about that. And with hunting, you're turning your phone off, which is basically saying, hey, I'm not going to deal with what's going on. Not deal with, but I'm not going to look at what's going on with all the other stuff that's going on in my life that all of us have to deal with for a couple of days. I'm just going to go out with my son and have fun and enjoy time together.
You know, and I've had people say to me like, well, are you pursuing something actively or is that just escapism? Like, are you avoiding the things that you need to confront in life? And I'm like, it is, but that's margin in life. And that's not inherently a bad thing.
Well, and it goes back to, man, like that old joke where it's like, you know, there's this guy down in Mexico and he's fishing off the coast, and this guy from America with an MBA comes down and he goes, hey, why don't you fish a little bit better and then get a crew, and then your whole crew can go out and go fish, and then you can catch a bunch of fish, and then you can sell those fish at market and you can make a bunch of money. And the guy in Mexico goes, well, what would I do with all that money? He goes, well, you could do whatever you want. You could retire. He goes, well, what would I do when I retire? You could go and just sit on the coast and fish all day. He goes, well, I'm already doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I come back to is like, we were talking about this the other day. Like, if I had all the money in the world, right, what would I want to do? Well, I'd want to go out hunting and fishing with my kids, you know?
Yeah. So I think there's just a beauty and a joy, and even if it feels like you're not doing anything productive, just to get out there and enjoy that peace and solitude. Are we in trouble?
No, we're good. My wife just walked in. It's like 11. We're drinking scotch, and it's been a fun night.
Yeah.
We ate a bunch of catfish.
Yep. Well, man, it's been fun. I look forward to the next fishing trip. I look forward to hunting this season. Right now, we're just riding out the heat wave in the dog days of summer.
The dog days of summer.
And trying to enjoy it as best we can. So, any other concluders?
That's it, man. I think the next thing we got to do is put our hunting goals together and put them out there.
Yeah, and we'll actually publish that this year. So we've got something to kind of look forward to be motivated towards, and kind of grade ourselves against.
And that might get us out to LBJ a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a spot, and we got to figure it out.
Yeah, hitting that Forest Service land hard.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. I know this has been kind of a rambling journey, but
this is what we call ADD.
Most of our hunting is exactly that. Most of Adventure 1 is just a rambling journey.
Yeah.
So until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.